So, with regard to compassion, cultivation of compassion, first of all, you have to understand what suffering is, the three types of suffering, and particularly that suffering, that of the conditioning suffering of samsara. Out of the three, this is the main suffering. And the more you feel the sentient beings who are suffering dear to yourself, the greater your compassion and wish for them to be out of suffering would be. So therefore, within the practice or cultivation of that, there are the two different traditions in the Nalanda tradition of India. One is that of cultivating the understanding that all sentient beings are one's own parents or relatives. Just as we have our parents and the relatives of this life, all sentient beings have been our relatives and parents in the past lives. And here the reincarnation, the theory of reincarnation plays a role, which is also believed by the non-Buddhist traditions. Whereas in Buddhism, in the non-Buddhist traditions, Ishvara or Shiva is the creator of all. And on the basis of that understanding or the belief in reincarnation, on the basis of that kind of creation, they believe that there is reincarnation, rebirth. We go from one birth to the next. Whereas in Buddhism, we don't believe that. So with regard to people, there are those who remember past lives.
So recently, any sort of record, some children who express their previous life very clearly, very clear memory about past life. Anyone who knows something about that, such sort of cases, no. I met two Indian girls in, I think, 70s. One from Patiala, one from Kanpur. Both girls, their memory about past life, very clear. So the case of the girl from Kanpur, since her sort of expression about past memory, so convincing. So the previous life's parent, who's still alive, so that couple also, you see, accepted this girl is their own daughter. So that girl, 4 parents, previous parent and this life's parent, like that. And then also among Tibetan, at least I think 7, 10 Tibetan who very clearly sort of express the memory about past life. And they have friend's name, their places, like that. So now, the Buddhist, or say the explanation, why it happened. As I mentioned, out of 4 mindfulness, the third mindfulness about mind. Now, some kind of I think we can say some kind of colorless mind. No feeling, no attachment, no other sort of positive sort of thought or negative thought, just a neutral. And there are also, you see, different level. As I mentioned before this morning, the dream level, deep sleep level, and faint level, then ultimately when we are dying, at the time of death, the most sort of subtle consciousness there. So there are some indication. There's so long that consciousness remain in the body remain very fresh. Just, I think about last 2 weeks, there's one monk, the wait, Kambo, Kensu, the other Gyutabak Tudum Shungi, the Nimakse Debre. Nimakse. Right.
State. So the abbot of Yudu monastery said 23 days, the monk state. This monk, even after clinical death state,
one monk from that monastery,
this took them
after death,
meditation for 21 days.
Death.
Or
but physically
another person,
very fresh.
He was
supposed to
have stayed for 23 days.
Like that.
So
it happened. And also in South India, Gumel because sum chomare. Gumel kasi. Kya? Ka. Mata. Kan tudum shunge kasi sumne chomare. Dani rojanala. I do South India, one monastery, about 3 cases remain 2 weeks, like that. So these are, from our viewpoint, the subtle consciousness still remain in the body. So as soon as subtle mind depart from this body, then within minute, the body become decay and smell, like that. So now that's sort of mind, different levels, but all same nature of consciousness, pure something. So that also changing. So there must be causes. In the causes, substantial cause and cooperative causes, Mare. So cooperative causes like eye consciousness, the object and also organ is cooperative causes. But the eye consciousness, as a consciousness, there must be substantial cause. That's the continuation of consciousness. So that's Buddhist way of explanation. The consciousness, the subtle level, there must be continuation of consciousness. Otherwise, such phenomena, mere luminosity, consciousness cannot develop. From matter, cannot develop. From nothingness, never develop. So there must be continuation. Like our body, the subtle particle, that level, no beginning. At the time of Big Bang, today my body's, the subtle the particles already there. Continuation of that subtle particle already there. So no beginning. Even Big Bang, there must be causes. Unless tremendous pressure develop, Big Bang cannot take place. So there must be tremendous pressure. So that must come from sources, its own causes. So these obvious pressure must have its basis. So small particles already there. So as far as continuation of our body's subtle level, continuously. So like similar, the consciousness also, you see the continuation, continuous sort of, also the continuity there. So the mindfulness about chit, about consciousness. See, if we sort of meditate on the consciousness and get some experience, the pureness of consciousness, that really also brings a lot of answer, a lot of new sort of ideas or theory, or basis of Buddhist theory. 자상가다, 자상가, 끼와 통마매댕에.
There is no beginning to our life. And with regard to the end, or whether there is end to our life or not, there are two different views. One is, as one tradition says, that when an arhat dies, the consciousness of the arhat ceases to exist anymore. Whereas many of the Buddhist philosophical schools say that the consciousness itself as such does not cease to exist at all, but the defilements, the destructive emotions and other defilements on the mind can be put to an end. Whereas the basic nature of the mind, which is that of luminosity and awareness, that doesn't have any kind of counteracting factor which can put an end to it. Not only that, when you cultivate the wish to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, this also has to come on the basis of this luminous and awareness nature of the mind. And therefore, the continuity of that mind cannot cease at all. And so, generally speaking, we can say that the mind doesn't have a beginning nor an end. And therefore, since time beginningless, since there are many different forms of life, there are those who are born from womb, and limitless number of sentient beings, countless number of sentient beings having been born from the womb of a mother countless times. And another system of cultivating that of compassion is to see the shortcoming of self-cherishing attitude as being the self-cherishing attitude, self-centeredness as being the cause of all kinds of misfortune that happens to us, whereas cherishing others is the source of all goodness. And so with regard to this point, the other text that will be taught, these 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas, touches on that. And detailed practices of this equalizing and changing self with others is taught in Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. And based on that, then you develop that of great compassion, not only wishing sentient beings to be free from suffering, but you develop this courage to work to free all sentient beings from suffering by yourself. Then with regard to the three types of suffering, the suffering of suffering is touched in this text by in connection with the suffering of the hell, the lower realms of existence. And then the changeable suffering is introduced also on the basis of the suffering of the human beings and so forth. Whereas with regard to wishing or developing the wish to be free from the third type of suffering, which is the conditioning existential suffering, this text touches on the states of mind from beginning with the fourth concentration level upwards, where they do not have obvious painful suffering, nor those of the changeable sufferings, but still the karmic imprints and the aggregates of mind-body aggregates are there, which are results of delusion and karma. And after that, having developed that of the great compassion, then when you develop the wish to liberate all beings from suffering, now how do you do that? First of all, you have to work on your own suffering in order to be work against or to overcome. You have to work to overcome the causes of suffering with regard to yourself, your own causes of suffering within yourself, and in that way you can overcome the suffering. And similarly, you have to use the same logic with other sentient beings by trying to help them overcome the causes of suffering. And the way to help others is by giving teachings. And therefore, the Buddha's only way of helping other beings from to go out of suffering is that of giving teaching. And so, by giving the teaching that one has experienced oneself, then the followers should apply these teachings within ourselves. So just as the Buddha has done it, likewise we should also help others by showing what is right and from wrong. And now, in order to be able to do that, of course, you may be very sincere in your approach, but then what you teach does not become suitable to the others, then it will not be of any benefit. So sometimes it can be even cause more problem. And therefore you have to be able to understand the other's predispositions, other's character, nature, and interest. Now, as long as you have the ignorance about the ignorance with regard to seeing everything, so long you will not be able to help others perfectly, completely. So with regard to objects of knowledge, there objects of knowledge are myriad and it's infinite, and so to know everything as they are is quite difficult. Whereas the true nature, the ultimate nature of everything is one. So everything is in one taste in that sense. So once you realize the ultimate nature of things, ultimate nature of one thing, then you can extend the same logic that you have used to come to that conclusion to all the rest of the phenomena, things. Whereas with regard to the myriad objects, the conventional things, you have to be able to still overcome the ignorance with regard to that. So in order to be able to see everything, the conventional things as they are, then you have to overcome what is known as the obscuration to knowledge. or cognitive obscuration, and which is an imprint. When we say it's an imprint, there has to be something that leaves that imprint on our mind, and that factor which leaves imprint of the cognitive obscuration within our mind is those of the destructive thoughts and emotions, the kleshas, the three poisons and so forth, as I've explained. And when you are able to overcome the delusions, these delusions, then you reach that of the cessation. Now, these delusions are not in the intrinsic, do not have any intrinsic, are not in the intrinsic nature of the mind itself. Therefore, they can be eliminated from the mind. Whereas the powers of the Buddha and so forth are states of mind which see the things correctly. And in order to see things correctly, without any mistake, you have to be able to overcome the ignorance which goes against that. And therefore, in order to be able to see everything as they are, you have to overcome this cognitive obscuration. And once you overcome this cognitive obscuration completely, then you reach the state of omniscience, seeing everything as they are. So, with regard to the predispositions of sentient beings and their interest and their nature and so forth, in order to be able to see that, it's not just enough to see someone as being intelligent and so forth, but you have to be also be able to know why this person has such and such nature, such and such intelligence, and so on, and why others are not so intelligent, and so forth. So when this comes, with regard to this, you have to go back to their past lives. Why some persons are more intelligent than others, and so forth. What causes and conditions they have created in the past lives. And of course, we talk about the Buddhas performing different enlightened deeds for the benefit of all sentient beings. So unless and until you are able to overcome this cognitive obscuration, there's no way you can perform a Buddha's deeds. So leave alone those of the arahats. So without becoming an enlightened, fully enlightened person, omniscient, you cannot help others perfectly. And in order to reach that, you have to have the wish or the aspiration to become a Buddha. And when you have that wish accompanies the main primary mind. And that primary mind, which is accompanied by that aspiration to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, is called a bodhicitta, this altruistic spirit of enlightenment. So this bodhicitta is complemented by the aspiration which goes together with it, as well as the compassion which precedes it, which is the wish to help other sentient beings. So with these two factors, you develop that of bodhicitta. So with regard to the practice of bodhicitta, we have the 37 practices of bodhisattvas. The second text that you have, if you have the red book, where's yours?
At that time, this person, quite well known, the one practitioner of infinite accuracy.
Good scholar, at the same time, very good practitioner. So he composed this sort of text according to his own practice. So I thought maybe new information for you. So now this text, you see, mentioned the practice, systematic practice, step by step. You see how to develop infinite altruism through these different sort of steps, step by step. So it is quite useful. So as a practitioner, we have to train the procedure is which mentioned here, with fuller knowledge about Four Noble Truths and 37 practice, with fuller knowledge about that, then actual sort of, or say the effort, like here mentioned here, step by step, like that. Yeah.
So in our tradition and text, there is mention of the four incorrect views, which are those of perceiving ugly things as being pleasant, and impermanence, looking at or perceiving permanence in impermanent things, and perceiving happiness in those of suffering, and perceiving some kind of a self nature in those which do not have any self nature. And first we have to overcome the admiration of this life, or preoccupation with this life, and then we go on to overcome the preoccupation with the pleasures of the future lives. And with regard to the ultimate goal of enlightenment or nirvana, we have to use our intelligence. It cannot come about merely through prayers. And therefore, this human life, in this human life, we have the human brain, the intelligence, and using this, we have to cultivate wisdom. Without this kind of wisdom, the intelligent minds that we have, there's no way we can pursue that goal. So we need to use this in order to attain the temporary goal of higher rebirths, and then the ultimate goal of enlightenment or nirvana. So these are shown in this text. So this text shows the means to achieve higher rebirth, and then that of the nirvana, and then the ultimate nirvana is that of omniscience, the Buddhahood. So these are shown. In this text there is short, it touches very briefly on emptiness, not in great detail. So we do not need to read through the text as such here. So with regard to bodhicitta, there are those two, conventional and ultimate bodhicittas. In other words, with regard to the ultimate attainment of Buddhahood, there is the Rupakaya, or the form body of a Buddha, and then the Dhammakaya, the truth body of a Buddha. And then the quality of a Buddha is such that he knows everything. So the body of a Buddha is something which is accessible to sentient beings, whereas the realization, the mind or Dhammakaya of a Buddha is something which is not accessible to us. And so because of that, the difference in accessibility between the Dharmakaya and the form body of a Buddha, Dharmakaya is called the body which is for the Buddhas themselves, and then the form body, the appearance in a certain physical form, is said to be a body which is for the benefit of sentient beings. And so, in order to be able to full benefit other sentient beings, we should train in the different causes. We should cultivate the different causes and conditions by which we can attain the form body, which benefits other sentient beings by being accessible to them. So there are various different practices through which we can, of course, help other sentient beings. And through these practices, we can accumulate what is known as the accumulation of merit, or store of merit, spiritual merit. And in order to be able to do that, in order to be able to help all sentient beings limitlessly after becoming a Buddha, you have to have the Dharmakaya. Now, in order to reach, attain, or achieve that Dharmakaya, which is free from all kinds of defilements that are within your mind stream, you have to also create the causes and conditions for that Dharmakaya. It's not enough just to accumulate what is known as merits, but you also have to develop the wisdom. So this wisdom is free from all kinds of conceptuality and elaborations, duality, and accustoming your mind, even at this stage, with this non-dual nature of things, being that and therefore, as we have covered earlier in the morning, with regard to the unwavering cause, then potential cause, and the impermanent cause, here this is what it comes down to, that the Dharmakaya and Rupakaya have to come about through their own causes and conditions, the concordant causes and conditions. So the mind, which is totally absorbed in suchness, which is also influenced by that of, or the wish to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, this mind, which is totally absorbed in emptiness or selflessness, is that of the ultimate Bodhisattva.
Second page, page second. Page second.
Page number 2 in this big. The compassionate mind. Touching it in conventional. 대화시도 해. 대화 주의 없습니다. 말에 안 나왔어.
어제 page 3 having paragraph almost the last one. After generating the conventional awakening mind of
No.
Bodhisattva, this I don't know. To cultivate ultimate awakening mind of Bodhisattva. So, 자다데 그주 전주고 쓰면서 아시다 전주 전주고 쓰면서 아시다.
So here
that
whereas the conventional bodhicitta is a sort of aspiration where you wish to have Buddhahood, to gain Buddhahood. Here, clarity here refers to being analytical. An object of ultimate, or the ultimate. So in that meditation, the multiplicity of the things do not appear, but their final nature, which is that of the emptiness of independent or essential existence. So you are not following after the appearances, but the ultimate nature, or the ultimate way of the existence of things. Which, when you try to check into the multiplicity of things, the conventional things, you cannot find anything to be there to point to as being this or that. So that is when you see the ultimate nature, and which is termed also as being seeing the what is not. It is ultimate seeing when you don't see it. And so when that ultimate nature of things is manifest to you, then it is you are in the state of stainlessness and unwavering, because it is held by concentration, single-pointedness, and like a butter lamp undisturbed by wind. And then next comes the putting effort in meditation. First you start with concentration, and then you continue that practice every day, and you continue to meditate. And so through these two kinds of efforts, it says this is achieved through constant and respectful familiarity with the yoga of calm abiding meditation and special insight over a long period of time. So in order to develop bodhicitta, you have to have this single-pointed concentration or calm abiding, shamatha. And when you develop shamatha, you should use only one object of your meditation and not let your mind be distracted by any other object. So when you are able to place your mind, focus your mind single-pointedly without wavering from your focus, that is shamatha. And then special insight or insight is that is like doing research.
Appearance and reality. So, on the basis of appearances, sometimes we develop confusion. We develop also the wrong view. So, in order to remove all wrong view, unrealistic view, we must know the reality. We must reduce the gap, differences of, or gap, and differences, appearance and reality. So forget what appearances, but must sort of investigate what's the reality. Thorough investigation. So more investigation, the object become, the reality become clearer, clearer, clearer. So therefore, the picture,
it's called
clearer, clearer, like that. So investigation, that's vipassana. Without investigation, just concentrate on any object, that's a meditation, samadhi. And on the basis, with help of samadhi, your mind, any sort of object which you want to think, your whole mind remain on it without sort of, because of the disturbances, without other attraction. Then on that, then further investigation, the reality, the nature of the reality. Now that's vipassana. So these, sometimes you see the text is mentioned, the vipassana, particularly now here, the vipassana which understand about ultimate reality. That's emptiness, shunyata. Shunyata. That is something like actual sort of what's the shell which hit on target. The samadhi, like kasadi means ka. Oh, projector maribada ti kasachuti. Mejo khati. Barrel, re. Gun barrel. Right? Gun barrel. Ka. Oh, barrel. You see, the more firm barrel, then our bullet can reach on target. So the barrel go like that, then our bullet may go there or may go your own head. So like that, the samadhi as sort of basis, and then investigation about the ultimate reality. Then more awareness about ultimate reality, then that gradually destroy our wrong view. Clear?
So and then it teaches that we have to combine the common abiding and insight meditation. Without the concentration, single-pointed, the power of the concentration, single-pointed concentration, you cannot investigate into the ultimate nature of things in depth. If you have an axe which is not blunt, you cannot cut the tree properly. if you in order to be able to hit at the right point to cut the tree, you have to have a very firm hand. So without the understanding of wisdom of selflessness, then mere concentration cannot overcome our grasping at a self or some kind of independent existence of things, independent nature of things. So this grasping at an independent nature of things has to be cut by this understanding of selflessness. So without being very sure about what selflessness is, and without being able to develop this correct view of selflessness, you cannot have the antidote to this self-grasping. So in order to get rid of some kind of overcome some fear of a snake, you cannot have that do that with just by seeing in certain place that there is an elephant. But you have to be able to be very sure that there is no snake, and then the fear will go away. And so similarly, you have to be able to see that there is no independently existing things. And then with that insight, you have to overcome the self-grasping, and through the understanding of the selflessness, you will be able to reduce or diminish those of the attachment, anger, and so forth. And with the help of this understanding of selflessness, then you can also strengthen the bodhicitta, compassion, and so forth. And therefore, it says, first of all, you have to cultivate calm abiding, shamatha. Merely to have some kind of understanding of selflessness, you don't need shamatha as such, because we can do that. We can analyze things and feel convinced to a certain extent that there's no self-existent things. Now here, in order to develop this insight into selflessness, in order to develop special insight, or vipassana, you have to develop that of the calm abiding. So in order to develop vipassana, you have to have a single-pointed concentration, which comes about through after having developed what are known as pliancy of body and mind. And once you have done that, then you can develop vipassana based on that concentration. And then what concentration is, or this calm abiding or shamatha is, and what is its nature, what are the causes and conditions that give rise to it, and then what kinds of pitfalls there are in order to develop shamatha, and how to overcome these pitfalls are taught here. And being able to take, you have to be aware of how much food you should take, and not taking too much, just enough, and then sleep. This is a prayer for the tea. It says the qualities of the Buddhas are inconceivable, qualities of the Dharma are inconceivable, and the Arya Sangha are inconceivable. So for monks, nuns, it's quite significant that we avoid or we don't take the meal after lunch. This helps in maintaining a very clarity of mind. And in the text, it also mentions to avoid fish and so forth. So, if possible, we should stick to a vegetarian diet. Now, when it comes to the actual session of meditation, when you do actual meditation, the certain physical postures makes difference. Yeah, you have to hold your body upright, straight. The spine has to be straight, and if that happens, then the channels are also clear and straightened, and because of that, the flow of energy, or whatever you call it, will be better. So we talk about the 7 postures of Verochana, so your feet are in the lotus position, and then the hands are in this meditation posture with the left hand under the right hand, and then the thumbs, tip of the thumbs touching, and holding this hands meditation posture at the point of the navel, and then your elbows should not touch the body, but it should be out, and then you straighten your spine, and your head is slightly bent forward, and the tip of the tongue has to touch the palate, upper palate, and your teeth and lips are held rather naturally, and your eyes have to look at the tip of the nose. And many times when people do meditation, they close their eyes. That's not very good. It's better to do meditation while your eyes open. So it's easier when you leave your eyes open, it's easier to detach your mind from the external objects as you keep meditating. Whereas when you close your eyes, the object may be a little bit dull, unclear. So when you meditate, for example, if you are using a statue of a Buddha as your focus of meditation, the image of that statue has to be formed in your mind, and as you meditate on the image of the Buddha, you have to focus your mind on that image that is formed in your mind, and you are not so much looking with your eyes at this statue of the Buddha as such, and you have to neglect this statue that is there and outside, but you have to focus your mind on the image that is formed in your mind of the Buddha. So with regard to object of Shamatha, single-pointed meditation, there are objects that you can use, can be like emptiness, or any other varieties of phenomena that are outside or inside, such as the different points in your body. So these are different objects that you can use to develop shamatha, and you can also use the mind itself to develop shamatha. You can, when you use the mind itself to focus, to develop the shamatha, you are actually doing that of the mindfulness of mind. And then you can use emptiness, just focusing your mind single-pointedly on emptiness. And then in Tantra, you can even visualize yourself as a deity, and you can also go into the details of the deity, such as on the eyes or and so forth of the deities. So so when you do such meditation, first when you are emotionally disturbed with unhappiness, or your mind swings between hate and love and so forth, you have to first calm it down. And so in order to do that, focus on your mind on the breath, not thinking about anything else, but just focusing your mind on the in and out breath. As you breathe in, you think, I'm now breathing in, and as you breathe out, you think, I'm breathing out. And so just focus your mind on that breath like that. You can do it like 21 rounds of in and out breath. And when you do that, your mind will be rather settled and calmed. The emotional disturbance will subside. And once your mind is settled, well, then you look at the object that you are going to use to develop shamatha, and try to form a clear image of that object in your mind, and then focus on that very clearly, and focus on it single-pointedly. And so, as it comes in the text, if you use a Buddha statue or an image of a Buddha, it should not be too big. Maybe it can be as big as an inch tall. And you have to imagine it to be very bright. And if you have this statue in front of you, for example, you can imagine it 2 yards away from your body, where you are sitting, and the height at which this statue or image of the Buddha should be is like at the level of your forehead, the point between the eyebrows, and then you have a very clear reflection or image of that Buddha in your mind, and focus your mind on that.
You have only 2 hands, so you cannot manage. I think first, let's finish the tea. I can wait. I also enjoy. Oh, are you ready now? Good.
Then, as you focus your mind single-pointedly on the object, if it so happens that if it feels that the image is moving, or it's increasing in size or decreasing in size, then that's not good. So you have to choose the sides, whatever original size that you have chosen originally, you have to keep that. And you should have the object right at the place where you have it. And of course, single-pointedly focusing on the object, the image of the Buddha, is good. But then, with that, you have to have very intense clarity in your mind of the image. So the mind itself, which is focusing on the object, if it's rather like feeling lethargic, or you rather don't call without any kind of a sense, then that's not good. So when this happens, there's this darkness falling, dullness falling on your mind, which is called cloudiness of the mind. And when, in order to sleep, of course, this is necessary. Yeah. So if you want to avoid sleeping, you have to have clarity in your mind. You have to be very alert. Your mind has to be very alert. So when you go to sleep, your mind becomes rather dull and not alert, and then slowly you go to sleep. So your mind here has to be very alert and clear. And with that in that state of mind, you have to focus your mind single-pointedly on the object. So there is this stability, that focus nature of the mind, and also the clarity and alertness. Now, what hinders this stability or focusing the mind on the object is that of excitement and distraction. And losing clarity is caused by that of what is known as mental sinking or laxity. And so when your mind is rather downcast, feels low, or you feel tired, then the mind tends to become rather overcome with mental sinking or laxity. And to overcome it, you have to bring up the mind, rather lift the mind up. And when you do that, when you feel rather uplifted, then it can also cause distraction or excitement. And so, too much feeling too high about within yourself, in your mind, causes that of mental excitement and distraction. And so you have to balance between the two, not being too highly excited, nor to have a downcast sort of state of mind. So it's very important to develop this shamatha, single-pointed meditation. So for those of you who are engaged in philosophical studies of Buddhism in the monasteries and so forth, it's important for you to try to develop shamatha from now on. Usually we tend to say that, this kind of practice, meditation, is something common to Buddhist, non-Buddhist tradition, so it's not so much important. But then without shamatha, without this single-pointed meditation, it's very difficult to develop the higher experiences that we usually talk about developing. So this I can tell from the experience. I'm not saying that I have high realizations as such, but I can tell from some experience that I have that we cannot disregard or belittle the practice of or developing shamatha, single-pointed meditation. So if you start, you can develop this and further. I know some Westerners. They are able to stay on one single-pointedly on one focus 1 or 2 hours. So when it comes when you apply such meditation in tantra, then there is this possibility of withdrawing the wind energy into the central channel and so forth. They were not born in a Buddhist country, but they are able to stay on one object single-pointedly for 1 or 2 hours. So whereas we don't have such ability yet. So for you also, Thai, it's important that you develop, you do some meditation. But you should not consider that single-pointed meditation is the main object or goal. But in order, you have to develop shamatha or the single-pointed meditation in order to develop vipassana. So whatever meditation or experiences of dharma you wish to develop, such as renunciation and so forth, it's necessary to have shamatha, and it makes a big difference. You can take so to disregard this development or cultivation of shamatha is not right. So you have to avoid or there of mental excitement and also there of dullness of the mind when you do shamatha. So when your mind is rather, you feel rather low spirited, then you have to bring up the mind and you have to develop a high spirit. And it's not about the body that you should hold your body high or low and anything like that, but it's about the mind. We have the potential to become a Buddha for the benefits. So we have to see the potential within ourselves. As it is said, the enlightenment is not bestowed by anybody, it is not owned by anybody, but once you see the nature of your mind, the Buddha is called that Buddhahood. And so in all kinds of practices pertaining to the Vinaya or the Pratimoksha and the Bodhisattva and Tantra, you have to think about all these the qualities that you can develop and bring the mind up and lift it up, and then from the dullness of the mind or when you feel down spirit and so forth. So before you go to work in the morning, maybe you can spend 10-15 minutes or half an hour to meditate on bodhicitta. You take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and then you try to develop the sense of renunciation and bodhicitta, and then after that spend some time in developing shamatha. So if you start one day, then slowly you'll be able to do it. You'll make progress. So maybe that's all about. So in this text, there's detailed explanation of how to develop shamatha, and it's a text that's written by an Indian master. So when you develop shamatha, you go through what are known as the 9 steps, mental steps. So first is that of placing the mind on the object. And then you continue. Next step is that of placing the mind, focusing the mind continuously. In the beginning, you may not be able to focus on the mind on the object even for 1 minute, but then as you get used to it, the meditation, you may be able to stay longer and longer, 10 minutes or 20 and 30 minutes and so forth. And even after that, the mind may still get distracted, or your mind may feel rather dull. And so when this happens, you have to be aware of these obstacles to shamatha, and when you become aware of it, immediately you have to apply the antidote and bring the mind back to the focus. So replacing the mind is the third. And And then even after that, you will be still be set with sometimes those are the subtler states of dullness of mind and excitement. And so accordingly, you have to apply the antidotes. And as you progress through these steps, you reach that of the eighth step. So at the eighth step, then you are able to focus your mind rather single-pointedly without the distraction or excitement, mental excitement and dullness. And then having developed these, this kind of powerful single-pointed, then you can perhaps use the tantric techniques. So this is all about the cultivation of shamatha. And then when you develop that of the ninth step, you develop what are known as the pliancy of body and mind, and then the bliss that comes from the pliancy of the mind and body. And then when complemented by this pliancy of mind and body, you develop shamatha finally. And combined meditation should be achieved first, combining the mind. After page number 9, after realizing common body. After page number 9, beginning.
After realizing common, meditate on special insight thinking as follow. All the teachings of the Buddha are perfect teachings, and they directly or indirectly reveal and lead to suchness with utmost clarity. The suchness, that is anatma theory, Sanskrit anatma theory, selflessness. Then another word is shunyata.
Buddha, of all the teachings, that 84,000 teachings of the Buddha, or as you usually say, the 84,000 teachings, or all these different teachings are methods to lead us to that state, the highest state that the Buddha himself has found. So which comes down to the means or methods to overcome the two obscurations, those of the destructive emotions and then the imprints left by them. And so both of these obscurations of the destructive emotions as well as those of the cognitive have to be overcome through the understanding of emptiness or selflessness. So all the teachings of the Buddha are said to lead us to that suchness, or that it flows into it and then finally reaches there, means so first of all, what is meant by the teachings leading us to the suchness in the beginning is that understanding of impermanence and suffering nature of things and so forth, are for us to develop this understanding of emptiness. And then next is stages that of the Buddhism says that there is no self-sufficient or permanently existing self. And also the teachings such as there being no external objects and so forth, these also are teachings pertaining to that of selflessness, or so these lead us to the understanding of emptiness or selflessness. And because they have not yet touched this subtlest selflessness, they are said to flow into that teaching, or selflessness, or the emptiness. And then finally, when the teachings on selflessness is subtle, correct selflessness is that of actually reaching that suchness. So what this shows is that the main teaching of the Buddha is that of the antidote to our defilements, and the utmost, or the ultimate antidote is that of understanding of selflessness or emptiness. Yogis should analyze
in the following manner. A person is not observed as separate from the mental and the physical aggregate elements and the sense powers, nor is a person of the nature of aggregates and so forth. That's my Dame said.
This is about that of the anatma, or selflessness. So Buddhism as a whole teaches those of the four seals, that all composite phenomena are impermanent, and that all contaminated things are in the nature of suffering, and everything is empty, and then nirvana is peace. So within the impermanence, which relates to the composite phenomena, there are those subtle and gross, so such as the changes that we see obviously, the obvious changes that we see, and the death and so forth, and then the obvious changes that we see in the houses and buildings and so forth, decaying. Whereas the subtle impermanence is not this obvious change that we see, but these obvious changes, of course, without any causes cannot happen. So if there is no subtle change within the objects, the obvious changes cannot be there. So we can see the difference between the body of a child and an elderly person, the change that has gone through has to happen in days, in years and months and weeks and days and hours and then seconds, minutes and seconds and so forth. So each moment things have to things change. So this kind of momentary change that is going on in the things, the subtle change, is the subtle impermanence. Whereas the obvious changes are obvious, we can see them when certain things meet with obstacles, abrupt obstacles, and abruptly put an end to them, or things like that, or when the causes are exhausted, then we see the end of a certain effect. But then the subtle change is happening every moment. It doesn't need any third factor to put and to make this for this change to happen. And so there's no need for a second factor or cause for this change to happen. This momentary change in the things to happen momentarily. So even the animals are aware of the gross changes that are happening, but then the subtle change that is happening, the momentary change, is something we have to become aware by using our mind. So we can use logic and find the conclusion that without such subtle change, there is no possibility for the gross changes happening. So the fact that something doesn't that just come about in one moment doesn't stay the next moment is just because of the fact that this thing itself cannot stay permanently. So it is existent, it is there, but then it is in the nature of disintegration or change. Does it make any sense?
Some sense? Momentarily changing, not due to some third cause, but its very nature of existence is in the nature of momentarily changing. So that's the subtle. Because me dago sarji seno kare. Lekja
Anatta, anitya.
Momentarily changing. No force can stop that. Always changing. So that is subtle level of impermanence. Now nuclear physicists, they also now realize that everything, even rock, and very subtle level particle, always moving, changing, like that. Anicca, right? So momentarily changing, momentarily impermanence, subtle level. So that's the basis of changing. Whole world, whole universe, whole sort of solar system, everything. You see, obvious change there. That's the basis based on momentarily changing. That is the
the person from can exist. So here in paragraph 3 on page 9, it teaches there are 2 levels of selflessness. So one is that of selflessness in terms of the self being impermanent. Whereas the non-Buddhists say that they believe or assert an Atma or soul theory, which says that the aggregates, the body and mind, are impermanent, but then the Atma is not changing. Yeah. So this has been said this morning also, that this kind of unchanging, permanent, unitary self is not there, and so there is such a level of selflessness. So this kind of Atma theory is something which is just comes from some kind of philosophical belief, theory. So there is no innate grasping at such a self, a permanent, unitary, and autonomous self as such, which happens innately in us. It comes from some kind of influence of some philosophical understanding. So it's, what this is saying is that there's no such a self, and therefore the person cannot be posited from within the aggregates, and nor can we point to something else other than the aggregates as being the person as such. And so this is when you establish that of the philosophical view, it's very important to, the logic is very important in Buddhism. So if when you say something, when you assert something, if there is some logical discrepancy, then you would be, there will be logical absurdities. Therefore, you cannot posit the aggregates, the psychophysical aggregates, as being the self. This is one thing. And then the next is the refutation of a substantially existent, self-sufficient self. So we instinctively have this feeling. For example, if someone says that I want to, if someone says that I want to change my body, if someone wants to say, it says that they want to change their body with ours, and if you see that if there is some kind of harm from this body that you have, then you would easily say, yes, I want to change my body with yours. So this shows that there is such a notion, deep in our heart, there is such a notion of grasping at this kind of self-sufficiently existing person. So usually we say that although it is based on our body and the mind, that we are healthy bodily and mentally, we usually think I am healthy. And so apart from the body and the mind, you have this notion of a person, a self. And so that is the self-sufficient, the notion or the grasping at self-sufficiently existing person or self. And then when you say it's beautiful, attractive or unattractive, this is also done in relation to yourself. So you say it is not attractive to me, it is not attractive to me. So in relation to yourself, you say something is beautiful or not. You are not saying that something is beautiful because it is beautiful to everybody else. And then you you develop hatred because someone is disgusting to you. And you feel attachment to someone because that person is beautiful to you. And so in relation to yourself, you make this kind of difference and have these emotions. So there is this I, the person that's to whom the things are beautiful or ugly, and accordingly you develop such attachment and anger. So if someone is really have a strong sense of I, you have to be, sometimes you have to be very careful to crack jokes at such persons, in front of such persons. Whereas there are other people who are rather relaxed and cool, and therefore they don't become angry easily, even if you make crack some joke at them. Whereas the other person who has very strong sense of I, thinking always of me and I, you can't provoke such person. Only a slight provocation can cause anger in that person. So the stronger the feeling you have of an I, the greater your attachment and anger and so forth, jealousy. And then on top of this sense of I, we have that of the self-centered attitude, the self-cherishing attitude. And then all the misfortunes occur or develop from there. In one of the sutras, Buddha has said that the mind, the sense or the notion of an I, is the devil. And this is the root of all kinds of distorted views. And this psychophysical aggregates that we have is empty of such a self. So this is also in the Pali. So this is this verse is common to all the Buddhists. So when you have a very strong sense of an I, independently existing I, then the rest of the this serves as the root of our destructive emotions, such as attachment, desire, anger, and so forth. As long as we believe that the things have some kind of existence from in their own right, that this I on the person should exist in its own right, then you would tend to find something to point to as being the self from amongst the aggregates. And in many of the Buddhist texts, the mind, the sixth sense, the mind is identified as being the person. Whereas the philosophical schools which do not assert such an independently existing self, there being an essentially existing self, they say that this self or the person is merely designated, labeled on the basis of the psychophysical aggregates. So they say that there is no person or self that can be found from within the aggregates, but the person is merely designated. So this philosophical school says that there is no, not even conventionally, such an independently existing self. So these have to to understand these, we have to really do studies. And it cannot be understood easily. And certain schools of thought within Buddhism also says that the self or the person is something inexpressible. So when they say this, they say that the self is neither one with the aggregates nor different from the aggregates. And if there is such a self which is neither the aggregates nor the one with the aggregates nor different from the aggregates, then you would have to posit something else, a third entity, which is rather difficult. In the mind-only school, Chittamatra and the Madhyamaka schools, they say that there is no they explain selflessness in relation to the person as well as the objects that the person utilizes. So for the person, in relation to the person, they also explain the selflessness of a person, and then in relation to the other objects, the phenomena, they explain that of the selflessness of phenomena. And so there is this kind of distinction between the selflessness to a person and selflessness to objects or phenomena. So with this you have a broader understanding of selflessness. And so, as opposed to these two selflessnesses, you have also the two kinds of graspings at the self, grasping at the self of a person and grasping at the self of phenomena. So these two graspings, in order to overcome these two, there are the teachings on the two selflessnesses. And the understanding of two selflessnesses serve as antidote to the grasping at these two kinds of self-grasping. And then within those who explain these two kinds of selflessnesses, then they also explain that there is subtlety, degrees of subtlety between the two. So when I don't have to read through the text, it's easier.
So I thought, you see, there are some bhikshus, isn't it, from Thailand, some bhikshu. See, there are some bhikshus from Theravada tradition. I just, you see, felt one idea. After this meeting, of course, I'm leaving. Then our translator, he also bhikshu and scholar. I think as far as knowledge is concerned, he may have better knowledge than me. Because, you see, these people spent many years for study. My studies, the actual study, only 13 years. These people, I think at least 15, 20 years. So in any way, so some discussion, including the Tibetan bhikshu tradition and the bhikshu tradition according to Theravada. Then also some Chinese bhikshu, if there are some Chinese bhikshu, then some according to Chinese like Kasa, Dhammakupta, you see these traditions. According to this tradition, you see so all same practitioner of Vinaya and minor differences. So I think really worthwhile some discussion. What similarities, what differences. So important is usually, do you understand English? Lil? With the Thai accent. Yeah, like that. You understand English? Oh, so good. So, see, I think it is very, very important. See, should know the
Bhikshu tradition, Vinaya tradition in other tradition. Otherwise, you see, I think due to some Western scholars sort of misinformation, in late the past century, 20th century, some books they describe Tibetan Buddhism as Lamaism, not genuine Buddhism. And also, you see, the people usually get some kind of impression that according to Tibetan Buddhist practice, Vinaya is not important. These are totally wrong. Vinaya practice is the basis of all Buddha Dharma. There are lay practitioners also there. Upasika, there. Since Buddha's time, Upasika practitioner also there. But mainly monk, bhikshu, and shamaniya. So the Tibetan Buddhism also, you see, 1,000 years, main holder of Tibetan Buddhism, which come from Nalanda tradition, main holder through generations, monk, bhikshu. And most of the Nalanda masters also, you see, bhikshu. So last more than 2,000 years, the tradition of Buddhism is really, I think, essentially, you see, carried by monk who practice Vinaya. So, and then on top of that, the name Hinayana and Mahayana, that also create a lot of misunderstanding. So for us, we also, you see, should know how sort of serious practice among Theravada practitioners. Wonderful. I heard, you see, some old bhikshus in Burma, in Thailand, there are, you see, some cases considered as a arahat. Arahat. Oh. So wonderful. So we Tibetan tradition also, you see, there are people who have some extraordinary experiences. So it is important to know each other clearly. So for that reason, I thought maybe worthwhile or useful to discuss about Vinaya practice. That is basis of Buddha Dharma and also the common practice. Clear? Good. Thank you. So good night. See you again tomorrow.